Meteorologists are at a loss to explain what is causing this weather and why it has taken flight to drive.
It is the agenda for the 21st century you're living in today. For a brave new world where everything that you cherished and held true will no longer exist.
This is the town of Nataf, just outside of Jerusalem, and this is the area where firefighters are focusing their efforts now. This is where the fire remains out of control in the hills and the valleys around us. The fire swept through here earlier today. You can see this home behind me was damaged, as well as the home behind that. Scorched earth all along this hill here on the ground, burning the greenery and melting just about anything that's plastic, like what appears to be a pottery bowl right here behind me. The fire has then spread from this hill across the valley to the other hills, and that's because of the conditions here. It's supposed to be the rainy season, and yet we haven't seen rain in more than 2 weeks.
Little more than 2 weeks after Italian scientists warned climate change had put much of the country at risk of flooding, parts of the northwest have been inundated by heavy rain. Torrential downpours caused the Piedmont region's Tanaro River to burst its banks, prompting local officials to ask the government to declare a state of emergency. 2 days of continual rain has had a similar impact on Turin, where the Po River also flooded. The region of Liguria has been hit hard and a red alert warning for bad weather issued. Meteorologists have warned of possible gale-force winds sweeping in over the coast. In Ventimiglia, near the border with France, 5 migrants were reportedly swept away after a swell hit the bridge they were living under. 4 were saved, but a Nigerian man is still missing, presumed drowned.
Tokyo has been hit by its first November snowfall in 54 years. The Japanese capital does see snow at least once a year, but it usually falls in January or February and rarely accumulates for long. As much as 2 centimeters of snow was predicted for the center of the city, according to the Japanese Meteorological Agency. When the last November flakes fell in the Japanese capital, John F. Kennedy was US president and Bob Dylan had just released his debut album.
So the temper tantrums failed, the rioting and smashing up cities failed, and sending death threats to electors failed. Now Hillary supporters, encouraged by Jill Stein's fundraising campaign, are demanding a recount in Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania. They spent months sniping about how evil and dangerous Trump was for saying he might not immediately accept the election results.
He refused to say that he would respect the results of this election. Now, make no mistake, by doing that, he is threatening our democracy. And the peaceful transition of power is one of the things that sets us apart. It's how we hold our country together, no matter who's in charge.
Now they're refusing to accept the election results.
Donald Trump refused to say that he'd respect the results of this election. That's a direct threat to our democracy.
So by Hillary's own logic, her supporters, along with Jill Stein, are now a direct threat to democracy. So when the right talks about vote fraud, it's a direct threat to democracy. But when the left does it, it's ethical.
But Hillary won the popular vote. What are you afraid of?
Oh, I don't know. Maybe the fact that she's a lying, corrupt sociopath. Maybe the fact that her entire campaign was backed by an establishment that wouldn't hesitate to exploit a recount to carry out the vote fraud that they thought they didn't need on election day. The Clinton campaign has already held meetings with computer scientists who claim that there are anomalies between votes cast on electronic voting machines and those cast by paper ballots. Yeah, one problem with that, Michigan didn't even use electronic voting machines. And as Nate Silver, hardly a Trump supporter, has documented, these so-called anomalies completely disappear when you factor in demographics. This whole thing was already debunked before it even began. Is Hillary Clinton willing to risk civil war in America by installing herself as part of a coup? Now this is all a long shot, but it just goes to illustrate how the left only professes its love for democracy when they're winning. As soon as they start losing, they have a hissy fit of epic proportions. We saw the exact same thing after Brexit, and they're still trying to derail that, pissing all over the democratic will of the British people. Jill Stein also keeps raising the amount they're asking for to fund this recount every time it's met. Could this just be one huge money-making scam? And why is Jill Stein pushing this? Is it to try and regain some lefty street cred because she was vaguely supportive of Trump during the campaign? If so, that's pathetic. Seriously, Jill Stein said that a Hillary presidency would mean nuclear war, and now she's throwing Hillary a lifeline.
Under Hillary Clinton, we could slide into nuclear war very quickly.
The deadline for demanding a recount in these 3 states is almost up. The Wisconsin deadline is tomorrow, in Pennsylvania it's Monday, and Michigan is Wednesday next week. If they extend those deadlines to cater for this campaign, then you know the fix is in.
Donald Trump has given a conciliatory message on the eve of America's Thanksgiving holiday. The US president-elect, who targeted whole groups during the campaign and has continued attacking opponents via Twitter since the vote, recorded a video released by his transition team.
We've just finished a long and bruising political campaign. Emotions are raw and tensions just don't heal overnight. It doesn't go quickly, unfortunately. But we have before us the chance now to make history together, to bring real change to Washington, real safety to our cities, and real prosperity to our communities.
New information tonight that Donald Trump got a dire warning about a major national security threat he'll face when he enters the Oval Office. A threat that comes from a young, impetuous dictator who executed his own uncle. U.S. intelligence officials tell CNN the White House is conveying that North Korea is a grave, near-term threat to America. The Wall Street Journal says the Obama team viewed North Korea as Trump's top national security priority and warned the Trump transition team about the threat.
Once the president-elect got the detailed briefings on the state of the North Korean nuclear and missile programs, I imagine it was new information and rather jarring.
U.S. officials and weapons experts say Kim Jong-un's regime probably has the ability already to put nuclear weapons on medium-range missiles, which could hit Japan and South Korea. and they're improving their longer-range intercontinental ballistic missiles. One is called the KN-14.
They've tested the ICBM engine. It may have new fuels that give it far greater energy and range. And with that range, the KN-14 can possibly reach Washington, D.C.
Those missiles haven't yet been tested to be able to re-enter the atmosphere, but experts say the North Koreans could be able to fire those missiles at the U.S. during Trump's administration. There are also new concerns tonight about Kim's violent tendencies and how President Trump will deal with him personally.
What should Donald Trump know about Kim Jong-un as an adversary?
Kim Jong-un is a dangerous man. He has grown up around violence. He seems to even enjoy violence. He has brutally killed dozens of his generals, and he is a leader without legitimacy. He needs to prove to the Korean People's Army that he is a tough guy.
On the campaign trail, Trump alternated between saying it's possible he could meet with Kim and saying he wanted to push him out of power.
He's like a maniac, okay? And you got to give him credit. How many young guys, he was like 26 or 25 when his father died, take over these tough generals?
Tonight, analysts have a serious question. Are these two leaders who will act rationally toward each other or impulsively?
Kim takes any insult very personally. We've seen that threats of 9/11 style attacks after the movie The Interview was released, and perhaps Mr. Trump is very amenable to responding strongly to any kind of criticism.
Now, we've pressed the Trump transition team for a response to that and on how they're going to handle Kim Jong-un. We haven't gotten a response.
Very different views from the front line, where protesters want the Dakota oil pipeline route moved away from the Standing Rock Reservation. There's no dispute earlier this week in frigid weather, law enforcement sprayed demonstrators with powerful blasts of water. Police say demonstrators set fires and tried to storm past their roadblock. But protesters accuse police of dangerous tactics, not just the spraying, but firing concussion grenades, rubber bullets, and injuring hundreds of demonstrators. The father of Sophia Lewinsky, a 21-year-old protester, says an explosion nearly cost his daughter her arm. Sophia is undergoing surgery. Authorities say they didn't use concussion grenades, rather demonstrators attacked them with makeshift explosives, even rolling 1-pound propane canisters toward officers. Amid all the violence at Standing Rock, silence. No sound of pipeline construction now because the Army Corps of Engineers stopped for talks with tribal leaders. The Standing Rock Sioux say the pipeline route will destroy sacred burial and prayer sites, and they fear the pipeline's proposed path under the Missouri River could contaminate water. The consortium funding the $3.7 billion pipeline that will run through 4 states from North Dakota to Illinois say it's safe. They also say it's a much more efficient way to transport crude oil instead of by rail.
Thousands of people who work in Belgium's health and welfare sectors have taken to the streets to protest against government plans for austerity measures. They're demanding improved pay and conditions. An estimated 20,000 people from the healthcare, social services and not-for-profit sectors came out to demonstrate.
Well, on that side of the story, large crowds have been gathering outside the South Korean Defense Ministry, where the intelligence sharing agreement was signed, calling for an immediate halt to the deal.
One person has been killed and around 100 arrested after demonstrators clashed with security forces in an English-speaking city in Cameroon. The protests arose out of strikes by both teachers and lawyers, who say French is now dominating schools and courtrooms in Bandama. Some protesters also blame France, which used to rule Cameroon as a colony.
A car bomb attack in Turkey has killed at least 2 people and wounded more than 30 in the southern city of Adana. Footage from the scene showed vehicles ablaze in a car park outside the governor's office. The force of the blast also caused widespread damage to buildings. Adana lies around 16 kilometers from the Incirlik air base, which is being used by US forces to launch strikes against ISIL targets in the region. In March, Washington ordered its military personnel and diplomats out of Adana and 2 other provinces in Turkey because of security concerns. While there's been no immediate claim of responsibility for the bomb blast, Turkey has been hit by a string of ISIL and PKK terror attacks over the past year.
we do stand on the edge of a great new era.
We built this great industrial powerhouse.
The whole idea of industrial capitalism in the West, government that was going to invest in infrastructure.
It is a time for pathfinders and pioneers.
What happened to the American century?
The share of income that we put into infrastructure has gone down starkly.
If you travel around the country, there's just not that much that's new.
What happened to America's ideal of progress?
All these things that had been established after the Great Depression fell apart.
You'll see that whole streets are just closing down.
A community that's undereducated, underemployed.
Baltimore was a blue-collar town. Now the air quality is wonderful because there's no industry here anymore. It's beyond light.
Detroit had a population of about 2 million people in 1950. It's now a little over 600,000.
A huge percentage of their budget goes to the military. This is an economy that's based to a large degree on killing people.
If you were to cut the military budget in half, we'd have a depression in the United States.
So they're literally working full-time and making poverty wages.
You have 1,600 vacant houses. It's insane.
They said, let's save a few dollars and pump the water in from the Flint River.
Decades and decades of being ignored.
Americans are finding themselves in a desperate situation.
There's new mistake. A lot of talented people here, but you will never know because of the reputation we got.
If you're an entrepreneur right now in America, the last thing you want to do is take risk. This is not a world I want to take risk in.
America is not the pillar of democracy and freedom that it was once seen to be.
Here we are, naked in front of the world. It's a real tragedy.